What would you do if you heard that one of your employees collapsed from exhaustion and her manager laughed behind her back? Jackson Reed wasn't the kind of CEO who sat behind a boardroom table all day, signing off reports before heading back to his penthouse in a chauffeured car. 10 years ago, he started Fresh Fold Subs with nothing more than an old truck, a borrowed cooler, and his calloused hands from working graveyard shifts at a gas station. He had manned the counter, scrubbed cutting boards in the dead of winter, and driven across state lines just to sell a few more sandwiches. He knew what bone-deep exhaustion felt like. He had lived through doing more work than his paycheck could justify. But as the company expanded to 6 branches with over 70 employees, and he finally had an office with windows overlooking the city skyline, Jackson started to feel something frightening. He was drifting away from the ground. Each week, the reports came in on time and in order, but something else was missing feeling. Until one evening, his assistant forwarded a customer email, just one line, but it chilled him to the bone. I saw a girl crying near the soda machine. Her eyes were swollen. No one checked on her. It was about the Brookhaven branch managed by Troy Beckett, a man once described as stable and low maintenance. Jackson called the regional manager to ask what was going on. The reply he got was, "You know how Gen Z is. Works a few hours and they're already complaining. They can't handle real pressure, a laugh, a joke, a tone-deaf excuse." Jackson hung up. He didn't say a word. He just turned to his assistant and said, calmly and slowly, "I need a trainee uniform and a new name tag." The next morning, the man stood outside the Brookhaven branch. No more graying hair, no more tailored suit, no more CEO aura. Just Eli, the new hire sent over by a temp agency. The door opened. No music played. The AC was broken. The thick air was filled with the smell of overcooked meat. And then he saw her. A girl around 25, hair tied back neatly, her uniform soaked in sweat barely an hour into her shift. She didn't look at him, just kept slicing tomatoes with such speed it made him blink. Each cut consistent, every movement precise. But her eyes grew dimmer by the second. "Hi, I'm Eli. Are you okay?" She didn't stop her hands, just replied softly, as if afraid someone might hear, "I didn't get a break yesterday, or the day before. We're always short-staffed here." Jackson swallowed hard. He was no stranger to exhaustion. But what he saw here wasn't a staffing issue. It was a system that drained people quietly. Marcus, the morning shift manager, showed up not long after Jackson walked in. Tight polo shirt, hair slicked back with gel, but eyes that never lingered on anyone for more than 3 seconds. "Eli, right, I'm Marcus, the manager here. We're short today, so jump in on prep. Shadow Leah. She's fast. Try to keep up." Jackson nodded and stepped toward the prep station. Leah, the young woman he'd seen earlier, was still working, her hands moving like they weren't part of a human body anymore, but rather a system powered solely by willpower. She didn't look up, just gave him a quick side glance and said, "Hey, I'm Leah. Just stay close. Don't touch the knives. And remember to change gloves often." Jackson smiled gently. "Got it. I'll try not to get in the way." But within 10 minutes, He realized she wasn't working fast because she wanted to. She was working fast because she didn't have the right to stop. She checked expiration dates more thoroughly than anyone he'd seen. She wiped the counter after every round of slicing. She quietly reminded co-workers when their masks slipped, though no one ever thanked her. And every time Marcus passed by, she seemed to shrink into herself just to avoid drawing attention. Around 11 a.m., the usual Thursday crowd started pouring in. 2 staff members called out sick at the last minute. Leah didn't complain. She just kept working. Her hands handled orders. Her eyes watched the water station. Her feet moved toward the spilled cup area, then back to the kitchen without missing a beat. Jackson was able to help a little, but it was clear no one else matched her speed or spirit. The truth was, one person couldn't carry an entire store. Around 2 p.m., as the heat peaked, Leah paused at the prep table. Her hands trembled slightly, like they no longer had the strength to hold the knife. Jackson stepped forward. "You need a break. Sit down." She shook her head. "Can't. Marcus will lose it." He didn't argue, just turned, grabbed a cold water bottle from the fridge, and placed it in front of her. She looked at him like she'd just been pulled from a wildfire. "Thank you," she whispered, as if gratitude were a luxury she wasn't used to affording. And right at that moment, Marcus stepped out of the office, phone in hand, laughing loudly with another employee. "You should have seen her earlier. Looked like she was gonna crawl to the door. I almost grabbed a cart for her." Laughter erupted around him. Then he sealed it with, "No idea how she still has a job here." Leah stood still. The water bottle trembled in her grip. She said nothing. No one around her said anything. Only Jackson, the man they thought was Eli, stood there, clenching his fists, his nails digging into his palms. He watched Marcus walk away without an ounce of remorse. Jackson had seen exhaustion before, but never had he seen cruelty become part of the daily routine like it had here. He didn't say a word, not because he didn't want to, but because he had made a decision. Every word he would say would come only after he had seen the full truth with his own eyes. And to do that, he had to stay to witness, not just visit. After Marcus walked away, Leah remained frozen like a statue. The cold bottle in her hand had grown warm, but she hadn't taken another sip. Jackson looked at her face, not angry, not furious, but frozen with a numbness deep inside, a kind of hurt that had gone past the point of reacting, the kind where someone no longer believed they were worth defending. "I'm sorry," Jackson said softly. Leah just shook her head. "It's nothing new. You're new here, right?" He nodded. "Yeah, but I've done this kind of work before, and I've never seen anyone treated like that." She let out a quiet breath. "Here, that's normal." Then she turned back to the grill station, as if the conversation had never happened. By late afternoon, the store looked like it had weathered a storm. The veggie bin was empty. Sauce had dripped onto the floor. The sandwich press groaned with every use. But Leah was still standing. Her eyes were red, her shirt soaked in sweat, her shoes splattered with sauce. Yet she kept wiping down every surface like if she stopped, the entire store would fall apart. Jackson offered to walk her to the bus stop. At first, she declined, but eventually she gave in, reluctantly. On the bench, under the fading afternoon sun beating down on the dry pavement, they sat side by side, silent for a long time. Then Jackson spoke. "Why are you still here?" Leah looked out at the street, her voice soft like wind. "My mum's in cancer treatment. I send money home every month. I'm also doing online school. 2 more semesters to go." Jackson didn't ask anything else. He understood she wasn't working for passion, not to impress anyone, but because she had no other choice. That night, he couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about one thing. How could someone like Leah, someone who needed support, end up suffocating in the very system that was supposed to protect her? The next morning, he returned early, still in the role of Eli. Before the doors even opened, he went straight to check the stockroom. The fridge was a mess: moldy cheese, wilted lettuce, expired date labels mismatched and peeling. Jackson noted each item, not to write a report, but to measure just how much negligence had become routine here. Troy, the manager, was just like the day before, sitting in the back office, feet up on the desk, scrolling on his phone. When he did show up, it was only to bark orders or toss out awkward flirtations at Kyra, the young woman at the register. No one laughed, no one responded, but no one dared push back either. Near noon, while Leah was cleaning the grill, Jackson overheard Troy muttering to another employee, "She always looks like she's about to keel over. Probably time to find someone new." Jackson caught every word, his hand clenched into a fist. He turned away so he wouldn't act too soon, but in that moment, his mind was made up. Tomorrow, Eli would be gone. Tomorrow, he would return, not to listen anymore, but to force everyone to face the truth. Saturday morning. Sunlight hit the glass windows of the Brookhaven store just like any other day, but no one inside knew that today would be unlike any day that had come before. Jackson Reed stepped out of a silver SUV, for the first time showing his real face. No more dyed hair, no more crooked Eli name tag, no more trainee apron. He wore a crisp white shirt, light grey jacket, and walked straight up to the front door, the same one he'd stood outside 2 days ago as someone else. When Troy spotted him through the window, a familiar smile flickered automatically, but his eyes gave him away panic. His face twisted, silently asking, "What's going on?" Jackson didn't answer. He walked past him, no handshake, no greeting, and stepped right into the middle of the store. "I need 5 minutes. Everyone, meet me at the register." The clatter of knives, the hum of the grill, the hum of the fridge, all fell silent. Leah had just clocked in. When she saw him, she froze, speechless. She knew the man standing in front of her wasn't the new guy named Eli. She was staring at the founder of Fresh Fold Subs. Marcus and Troy flailed awkwardly, trying to regain control. "Everyone, this is Mr. Reed, the CEO of the company." One employee in the corner whispered. I knew that was him. He was on the homepage of the website. Jackson raised his hand. "No need for introductions. I'm not here today to review paperwork or listen to explanations." The room went silent. No one moved. "In the past 2 days," he said, voice calm but sharp as a blade, "I worked alongside you as a new hire. I watched. I listened. I observed. Troy gave a forced smile. If there's anything you weren't satisfied with, silence. One word. 1 second. The entire space froze. Jackson turned to the staff. I saw employees pushed to exhaustion, and no one checked on them. I saw spoiled ingredients used instead of thrown away. I saw a manager not doing his job, spending his time joking around, flirting, and mocking the very people keeping this store alive. Troy tried to cut in. Seems like someone exaggerated a little. No one needed to tell me. I heard you, with my own ears. Jackson turned, looking directly at Leah. You never complained. You never asked for anything. You just worked harder than anyone I've ever seen. But that's not strength. That's survival. And an organization like ours has no right to exist if we force our people to survive. Leah stood still. Her lips trembled slightly, but she said nothing. She just gripped the straps of her apron tightly, as if trying to keep herself from falling apart. Then Jackson turned back to Troy. You'll hand over your keys, right now. Based on what Troy snapped. 2 days undercover and you're firing me. No, Jackson replied, eyes locked on him. I didn't need 2 days. I needed 2 hours. 2 hours to see a rotten leadership system, a toxic culture, and a man unfit to represent the name Freshfold. No one defended Troy. No one objected. He hesitated, then slowly removed his name tag, unhooked the keys from his belt, and dropped them on the counter with a sharp, final clack. Jackson turned to the rest of the team. I'm sorry I let this place slip out of my sight. But starting today, that ends. One employee gave a small nod. No one clapped. But in their eyes, something had shifted. It wasn't excitement. It was relief. Like a door had finally opened after being sealed shut for months. Jackson took a deep breath, and he knew today wasn't the end. Today was the beginning. After Troy left, the glass door clicked shut behind him like a heavy period marking the end of Brookhaven's long stretch of silence. The air inside was still thick, not from the kitchen smoke, but from emotions that hadn't yet found names. Jackson stood there for a moment, saying nothing more. He simply looked around at every face, every pair of eyes. No one was staring at the floor. No one looked afraid. Only waiting to see if this was a real moment or just a passing breeze. He walked toward the small office in the back, once Troy's personal domain. The clipboard still sat on the desk, the schedule printed in chaotic ink, someone's name spelled wrong 3 times in the same week. Jackson picked it up. He returned to the counter, voice calm but steady. We start over, not with slogans, but by seeing each person for the work they truly do. He read aloud Kyra. The girl at the register looked up, cautious. You're listed as part-time, but your time cards show you average 36 hours a week. Is that right? Yes. But the old manager said there wasn't budget to move me to full-time. You've worked double shifts for 3 straight weeks. As of today, you're full-time with full benefits and insurance. Kyra's eyes widened, but instead of cheering, She just pressed her lips together and gave a slight nod, as if trust was slowly finding its way back, little by little. Jackson continued. Darren, the young man by the prep station, raised his hand. Here, you used to install HVAC systems with your uncle, right? Yes, sir. How'd you know yesterday I saw you fix the sandwich press with a shoelace and a paperclip? A few laughs broke out, soft but real. Next week, you'll be sent to support the East Shore branch with freezer repairs. The company will cover all travel expenses and pay you for the full workday. Darren looked like he couldn't believe his ears. I really get to go. It's not a vacation. It's a technical support assignment. But yes, I believe you can do it. Jackson didn't need to turn around. He knew every eye in the store had changed by now. And then he turned to Leah. She still stood in the back, not pushing forward, not saying a word. Jackson gave a small gesture. Walk with me for a moment. They stepped into a narrow hallway behind the kitchen. No noise, no heat, just a quiet corner, the last bit of privacy left in the store. I don't know what kept you coming back to this place every day, he began. But I know this. I'm incredibly grateful that you didn't give up. Leah looked down. I didn't expect. You were really you. I didn't expect I'd let it all get this bad either. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. We're going to pay your full salary for the next 2 months so you can rest. Take care of your mother and finish your remaining classes. After that, if you're ready, there's a spot for you on the training team at headquarters with flexible hours. Leah looked at the envelope, then at him, her eyes beginning to redden. Why me? There are others who work just as hard. Jackson shook his head gently. Because I saw you keep this place from falling apart while being treated like you didn't exist. She swallowed hard. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. Just know this. This won't happen again. Not here. Not anywhere else in this system. They stood there, not as CEO and employee, but as two people who had just pulled each other from the depths of silence. Monday, 6:15 a.m. The sky above Brookhaven was still a pale grey. Streetlights flickered one last time before shutting off, giving way to the faint light of dawn. Jackson Reed stood in front of the store, holding a cup of black coffee, no sugar. Not to supervise, not to command, but to begin again the way he should have long ago. Today, he wasn't alone. Behind him stood 2 members of his senior executive team, each holding a clipboard, a stack of documents, and a full quality audit plan. When the door opened, all 3 stepped into the quiet space of the store. The smell of disinfectant from last night's deep clean still lingered on the tile floor. The fridge hummed softly. No one spoke. Jackson pointed to the back. Start with the storage room. Check every expiration date, every temperature log. If anything's off, flag it. Don't gloss over anything. The 2 executives nodded and moved toward the kitchen. Jackson sat down at a table near the window. No laptop, no thick briefing packet, just a blank sheet of paper, a black ink pen, and a sealed envelope with the words, Leah Monroe, New contract, 6:45 a.m. The door opened. Leah walked in wearing a light jacket, a small backpack, her face still shaking off sleep, but her eyes unmistakably surprised. She stopped in her tracks. "You actually came back?" Jackson nodded. "I promised I would. I thought you'd send someone else. I'm not like most people." He pointed to the chair across from him. "Sit down." Leah sat. Her hand rested lightly on the envelope, but she didn't open it. "That's the official contract. Position training and customer experience support. You can work remotely or from the office. Salary, benefits, relocation assistance if needed, it's all in there." She looked at him, eyes uncertain. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything. Just be honest. Do you want this?" She stayed quiet for a few seconds, then softly said, I'm just afraid that if I leave, the others will be left behind. They're tired too. They've been through the same things I have." Jackson gave a slight nod. "I spoke with Kyra. She'll take over the morning shift manager role for now. I trust her. You do too, don't you?" Leah nodded. "She doesn't talk much, but she's steady. I used to think if anyone should be steering this place, it's her." They stood up almost at the same time. No need to stretch it out. Leah turned and walked toward the back. Getting ready to leave, she wasn't on shift today. But just as her hand touched the kitchen door, she paused. "I still want to come back here every month, just to see if everyone's doing okay. Is that all right?" Jackson smiled. "You don't have to do that forever. But if you want to, then absolutely." 7:15 a.m. Employees began to walk in quietly, without rush. But clearly, something was different. They saw Jackson standing at the front counter, next to the old bulletin board, now wiped clean and written anew with fresh ink. He didn't wave. He didn't shake hands. He simply waited until everyone had clocked in. No speeches. He said clearly, "I know many of you have heard the phrase, 'Things are going to change,' way too many times. But today, I'll show you what real change looks like." The team watched, their eyes focused, no longer guarded. It was the look of people waiting for something worth believing in. "First, an independent HR team will be working here all day. They'll speak with each of you privately. You'll be paid for that time, and no one will be punished for telling the truth." A hand went up from the back. It was Darren. "What if someone talks bad about the old manager? Will that get them in trouble?" Jackson looked directly at him. No threats, no surveillance, no consequences. That's the first rule of real change." A nod, a quiet exhale. Someone in the group smiled for the first time in weeks. After laying out the details of the anonymous interviews with the independent HR team, Jackson paused for a moment, scanning the eyes watching him. No one interrupted. No one looked down. He knew this silence was different from 2 days ago. It wasn't fear, it was attention. "Second," Jackson continued, "we're creating an employee feedback council. Each branch will nominate 2 representatives. They'll meet directly with the executive team every quarter to share concerns without going through any management layer. A young staffer, hands still damp from rinsing dishes, asked quietly, "You mean we can give feedback straight to the top?" Jackson nodded. "Not just feedback. You'll help shape decisions. What we call company culture won't just be printed on posters, it will be rewritten by you." There was murmuring, but not skepticism. It was hope, tentative, but beginning to take form. Jackson looked toward the shift schedule. "Third, we're overhauling the work schedules. No more back-to-back doubles, no more last-minute calls to cover someone, no more find your own replacement if you want time off." Another employee raised a hand. "What about pay? Are wages going up? We've been waiting for a raise for nearly a year." Jackson gave a small smile. "I asked that same question back when I worked the bakery counter at 21. He paused, then spoke clearly. "We're reviewing all pay levels across every location. New rates will be announced by the end of this month, and they'll be retroactive to the start of this quarter." This time, a few scattered claps broke out. No one stood up. No one chanted slogans. But something had just been lifted off people's shoulders. A bit of weight had melted away. Jackson turned and pointed toward the back room. "Today, the executive team won't be sitting in a meeting room. They'll be working here right beside you. No distant observations, no evaluations. They'll ask, they'll listen, and they'll act." The staff began to break from the gathering, but no one rushed. One person patted a co-worker on the shoulder. Another pulled out a notebook to jot something down. The atmosphere in the store felt like a factory restarting, not clunky and groaning, but smooth and steady. By midday, Jackson returned to the sandwich station, this time not to supervise, but to learn. He stood next to Darren, the young man he'd discovered after watching him fix a machine with a shoelace. "You ever thought about becoming a technical trainer?" Jackson asked, sliding bread into the oven. Darren laughed. "Me? I just know how to make things work. I'm not great at talking." "You don't need to be great at talking. Just honest," Jackson replied. "Then, I can do that," Darren said, a spark in his eyes for the first time in weeks. Early afternoon, a middle-aged woman stepped into the store, company uniform, toolbox in hand. "Maintenance," she said. "Got sent to fix the front window. Heard it's been cracked since last summer." Jackson nodded. "Probably. One of Marcus's legacies." The woman examined the edge of the glass and muttered, "Sealant's all wrong. Should have been replaced long ago. I'll clean it up. Let's make sure this time it's fixed right," Jackson said, half smiling, half heavy-hearted. By day's end, the HR team began private interviews with each employee. No whiteboards, no cameras, no forms to check. Just a laptop and a person who knew how to listen. Jackson didn't attend any of the sessions. Not because he didn't care, but because he understood some things are only said when the most powerful person in the room isn't in the room. Instead, he sat with Kyra at a small table near the window. "HR said they'll call me next week about the temporary shift manager role," she began, "but I want to hear your thoughts first," Jackson replied. Kyra gripped her water cup. "I want to do it, but if I can, I'd like to change how we train new hires. Right now, we just hand them a uniform and tell them to shadow someone. They feel lost, and then they quit. How would you change it? Give me 3 days of one-on-one training. I'll write the checklist myself. If they pass, they stay. If not, then let them go. Don't force it. Jackson nodded slowly. Write it up. I'll approve it. Kyra looked at him, eyes steady. Really? You're on the front line. You see what I don't. My job is to trust the person who's brave enough to say that out loud. The sun began to set across the street. Inside the store, people had started working like a team, not because anyone told them to, but because they believed this time might be different. Leah stepped out of the break room, wearing a denim jacket, getting ready to leave. She stopped beside Jackson, her voice soft but certain. You're still keeping your word about the training position. Every word, he said. Then I'll take it. But on one condition, once a month, I'll come back here. Not to supervise, but to listen. Jackson nodded. You won't have to do that forever. But if you want to, she smiled. I want to, at least, until this place is strong enough to stand on its own. The following week passed like a different kind of breath at Brookhaven, not less tiring, not more rushed, but finally with rhythm, direction, and hope. Kyra, the one who used to quietly carry double shifts, now stood coordinating between stations, with sharp eyes and a calm voice. She didn't shout, she didn't threaten. She simply asked one question every time she gave an assignment. Do you understand why you're doing this? And strangely enough, people actually began to answer. Leah, now in her new role as training staff, started writing the store's very first onboarding materials, not from a pre-made manual, but from her own lived experience. What makes someone quit in their first week? What almost broke her, yet didn't stop her? And what makes a place worth staying? Her first training session was with 3 new hires, 2 college students and a single father who used to cook at a nursing home. There were no lectures, no slideshows, just one long table, 3 blank sheets of paper, and a single question: if this is your only week working here, what do you most want to learn? And from that question, Leah built an entire training model centered on people, not processes, not productivity, but on how to make sure no one gets left behind. Darren, who once only worked the grill, now had an entire equipment checklist posted in the tech area, something no one had ever thought to implement. No one assigned it to him. He wrote it himself, printed it, and posted it, and then other employees began to follow suit. A night shift worker suggested changing how vegetables were prepped to reduce bruising. A cashier hand-wrote anonymous feedback corner and taped it under the time clock cabinet. No orders from above, no budget approvals, just one shared belief this time: their voices would be heard. At other Fresh Fold Subs locations, the ripple effect was slow but visible. The North Point branch, once with the highest turnover rate, suddenly requested a copy of Leah's training model. The Midtown location began drafting plans to elect employee council reps. The Riverside store, for the first time in 6 months, recorded 4 straight weeks without a single internal complaint. Jackson didn't go to each location to give orders. He did just one thing. He showed up. No announcements, no entourage, just a man with rolled-up sleeves walking in during the lunch break, asking one simple question. What do you need here to do your job better? And no two answers were the same. One place asked for extra chairs for older staff. Another requested a new supplier because of late deliveries. One just wanted a decent fan for the prep area. And Jackson didn't make empty promises. He wrote down every suggestion and then came back. Not to check progress, but to say, I heard you, and here's how I'm responding. Returning to Brookhaven at the end of the month, Jackson walked in during the lunch rush, no one startled, no one avoiding him. Darren was adjusting the new equipment board. Kyra was helping a new team member learn how to enter allergy-safe orders. An elderly customer nudged Leah and joked, "You running the place now, kid?" Leah just smiled and shook her head. "Not yet, but at least now I can breathe without being afraid." As evening settled, Jackson stayed until the end of the shift. When the lights went off, he and Kyra did one final walkthrough of the kitchen. Everything was clean, organized, no scrambling, no giving up. He stopped in front of the staff suggestion box, no longer dusty. Inside were 6 handwritten notes. One of them read, "Thank you for not just fixing the glass, but for letting the light in." Jackson picked it up, folded it in half, and tucked it into his chest pocket. Not to show off, not to file away, just to remember. No formal speech, no press release or flashy media campaign. Just a small store in Brookhaven, once the place where employees collapsed from exhaustion, now the quiet epicenter of a transformation. And then it began to spread. The North Point branch, once losing 12 employees in a single quarter, sent a request. "Please send us the onboarding guide written by Leah Monroe." Midtown, the branch with the highest customer complaint rate, called headquarters. "We need to learn how Brookhaven built their internal feedback team." At the East Shore location, where Darren helped repair the freezer, a manager wrote in the weekly report, "I learned more from one technician than I have from 3 memos from corporate." Jackson didn't stand on a stage shouting slogans. He didn't roll out company-wide policies in a top-down, cookie-cutter fashion. Instead, he went to each place. No announcements, no sitting in an office, just showed up, empty-handed, and asked, "What do you need to make this job worth keeping?" Some places answered with specific requests. Others replied only with a hollow look after years of becoming far too used to silence. But then a quiet miracle happened. One person dared to speak. Another dared to listen. And from that, a culture began to shift. Leah, now a regional trainer, hosted her first in-person onboarding session at the Midtown branch. 30 minutes after the session ended, she received a message from a young woman on staff. "You don't know me, but you told a story like mine, and it made me feel like I wasn't weird anymore." She didn't reply right away, just saved the message and quietly added another page to her training manual, recognizing silent burnout. a skill not found in any official course. Kara, after proving the success of her new training model, was offered a regional manager position. She turned it down. Her reason was simple: I don't need a title. I need to be where I'm actually making a difference. The corporate office didn't argue. They gave her full authority to reform the internal training system on her terms. She didn't write PowerPoint decks. She drew diagrams in marker on a whiteboard. Connection, not obligation. Quality, not formality. Choose the right people, not just enough people. Darren, on the other hand, remained quieter. He didn't send long emails. He simply uploaded a PDF to the internal system titled Basic Technical Toolkit for people who know nothing about machines. No one asked him to. But within 3 weeks, it had over 40 downloads across various branches. And one day, a new employee at the Westport location emailed, "Did you really write this?" I followed the checklist exactly. The machine stopped buzzing in 5 minutes. Darren replied with just 3 words. "You did great." The new culture wasn't loud. It didn't make people feel pressured to change. It made people want to do well because now they knew their effort wouldn't be forgotten. At headquarters, Jackson kept visiting branches on weekends. No one knew when he'd show up. No one needed to prepare. All that mattered was the question he asked every time he walked in. "What are you missing to make this job worth staying?" And this time, everyone had an answer. One weekday evening, the 12th floor of corporate headquarters was nearly empty, except for Jackson Reed. He stood by the window, one hand resting on the cold glass, eyes watching the slow crawl of traffic below. Everything still functioned as if there had never been a crisis, but he knew some things would never be the same. Not just Brookhaven, not just a few new policies, but him. A man who once thought he was still close to the ground had been standing too far away for too long. On his desk sat a laptop. An email draft was open. One line in the subject field. From Jackson Reed, no title, no company logo, just one human writing to others. And he began to type. "To all of you from the sandwich counter to the central dispatch desk recently. I did something I once thought was unnecessary. I disguised myself as a new hire in the company I founded because I wanted to know what was really happening without going through a report, because I wanted to see real people, not just numbers. And what I saw is what made me write this letter. I saw exhaustion being overlooked. I saw loneliness during long shifts with no one checking in. I saw patience mistaken for a lack of effort. And I realized the fault isn't in a few individuals. The fault lies in how we've let our culture drift directionless. I'm the founder of this company, but I was the one who let some of our stores become places where employees were pushed to the edge. So starting today, every location will have a direct feedback line to HQ. No middle layers, no fear of consequences. Every message will be read and answered not with canned replies, but with real, concrete action. And every person, no matter their role, has the right to say, "I'm not okay." If anyone is dismissed or disrespected for speaking up, that person will answer to me, personally, because I forgot one truth. We don't build a company on branding, we build it on people. And if I can't protect that, then I don't deserve to lead. From now on, we're not repairing things to protect an image. We're rebuilding to earn back trust. Jackson Reed. The email was sent at 8:42 p.m., just 7 minutes later. The first reply came from a warehouse employee in Arizona. I didn't know who you were until last week, but I read your letter 3 times. And for the first time, I believe someone's actually listening. 2 days later, every bulletin board across the entire system changed. Gone were the long, wordy announcements. In their place, a clean white frame with bold black text. If you see something wrong, speak up. And if you think no one's listening, send it to me. I will listen. Jackson. Below that was his personal email address. No assistant, no filter. @Brookhaven. Leah read the letter during her lunch break. She didn't say anything. She just carefully printed a copy and taped it to the small fridge in the staff break room. Darren saw it, nodded slightly. First time. I've seen someone keep their word after leaving the store. The responses began pouring in. Some were only a single line. Thank you. Others were 3 pages long, telling stories of 5 years of being ignored by managers. Some were full of anger. But Jackson didn't flinch. He read every one not to defend himself, but to finally name the things he had once failed to see. 2 weeks after the company-wide letter, Jackson Reed drove to a small suburban center on the east side of the city, once used for quarterly training sessions for regional supervisors. Today, there was no lecture on metrics growth, no SWOT models or KPI charts, just 13 plastic chairs arranged in a circle and a whiteboard with 3 handwritten lines. Employee advisory session, listening, not leading. All voices equal. Jackson didn't sit at the front. He quietly chose an empty chair in the back corner. No name, no title, no opening remarks. The facilitator was a brown-skinned woman around 50, hair tied back simply, wearing a worn plaid shirt. She didn't say much, just smiled gently and said, "No one here is being recorded. No one's name is being written down. If you want to speak, speak. If you don't, that's okay too." A young employee with bright blue hair spoke first. "At our store, someone quit in the middle of the week. No one asked why. It was like that person never existed." Another thin, wearing glasses added quietly, "At our branch, we used to joke that if we collapsed right there on the floor, they'd just drag us out and slot in the next shift. No one would ask questions." An older woman, her hands calloused from years in the kitchen, spoke softly. "It's not about the money. It's no one listens anymore. And when you've been quiet long enough, you forget why you even wanted to speak." Jackson sat silently. No notepad, no nodding for approval. He just let the words land where they needed to, inside him. When the session ended, people stood and slowly filed out. No hugs, no dramatic tears, just lighter steps as they left. One person stayed behind the young man with glasses. He approached Jackson, fumbling with the strap of his backpack. "You're Jackson Reed, right?" Jackson nodded. "I don't need anything. I just wanted to say one thing." He hesitated. I used to think people at the top only knew how to send quotas and fire people, but since we heard about what happened at Brookhaven, we've started talking to each other again. Jackson didn't answer right away. He glanced around the room, where the ceiling fan still hummed softly. Then he turned back. Brookhaven reminded me why I started, and why I'm not allowed to forget. The young man nodded. I think change starts when someone finally asks, "What's really going on here?" That night, Jackson got home later than usual. The kitchen was still dark, as if it had waited for him to turn on the light. He didn't turn it on right away, just poured a glass of water, stood by the window, and looked out into the backyard garden. He thought of Leah's face the day she held her contract in both hands, then looked up and said, "For the first time, I feel like I don't have to carry everything alone." He remembered Darren's proposal, not a request for a raise, just a simple ask for a proper toolkit and clear training time. And he remembered the look in Kyra's eyes when she pointed to her hand-drawn hiring chart with a marker and said, "I don't want to keep great people by making promises. I want to keep them by giving them no reason to leave." The next day, the internal system logged a surge of emails from over 30 branches, not complaints, but workflow improvement templates, training program proposals, ideas for supporting employees with over 3 years of service, and even lines like, "Thank you for trusting us enough to ask what we think." Freshfold didn't become the biggest company in the industry. Its stock price didn't skyrocket overnight. It didn't instantly win Best Workplace Culture Awards. But inside each branch, each kitchen corner, each register station, people began to lift their heads. They began to talk. They began to act on their own, not out of fear of being fired, but because, for the first time, they believed kindness wasn't weakness, and leadership wasn't about being loud, it was about showing up when everyone else had gone quiet. 1 month later, at Freshfold headquarters, Jackson Reed walked into his usual office. But this time, he didn't carry a financial report or a market expansion strategy. In his hand was a small piece of paper folded in 4, its edges slightly worn. He unfolded it, reading it for the 10th time that week. If today you see someone who looks tired but still tries to smile, please don't assume they're okay. They might be holding it together just so they don't fall apart. That note was written by a night shift employee at Brookhaven, someone who nearly quit but chose to stay because a new manager finally knew how to listen. Jackson didn't keep it as a keepsake. He pinned it to the whiteboard behind his desk right between policy documents, branch maps, and analytics charts. As a reminder, the core of any system isn't growth speed, it's people. After the overhaul, not everyone agreed. Some mid-level managers refused to change and they left. Some shareholders asked, "Aren't we softening the system?" Jackson gave only one answer. "We're not soft. We're learning to do what's right even when no one is watching." And strangely, the results exceeded expectations. Turnover dropped by 31% in the following quarter. Internal reviews showed employee satisfaction reached the highest point since the company's founding. Leah's training materials were adopted as the company-wide model. Darren was promoted to lead the rookie technician team for the region. Kyra was invited to join the strategic HR board, not as a token voice, but to make actual decisions. But the thing Jackson was proudest of wasn't in any report. It was in a small story he heard while visiting a newly opened branch. A young woman just hired was wiping down a table when a customer accidentally spilled a full glass of water on her shirt. She panicked. Other staff began to stand, ready to jump in. But then, Kyra gently stepped forward, knelt beside her, pulled a dry towel from her pocket, and said, "It's okay. We'll take it one step at a time. No scolding, no humiliation, no learning through failure. Just a moment delivered right, and with care." And that was the culture Jackson had always hoped for, a culture of people who know how to kneel down, so others can stand back up. That night, when Jackson got home, he didn't turn the lights on right away. He sat at the dining table, opened his laptop, and added one final line to the bottom of the leadership commitment sent out to the entire company. "I won't promise I'll always be right, but I promise I will always show up, listen, and never treat anyone as invisible." That weekend, at a company-wide gathering, a young employee stood up to speak in front of hundreds. Her voice trembled, hands gripping the microphone tightly. As she said, "I used to think I was just a shift filler, but today I know I'm part of something bigger and I won't stay on the sidelines anymore." As she stepped down, the entire room rose to its feet, not because she was the most exceptional, but because in her they saw themselves. People who once thought they didn't matter, who once believed they were just a tiny cog, who once thought staying silent was the safer option. But now they knew one person stepping out of silence can pull a generation forward. So if you are somewhere in the system, tired, quiet, and thinking no one sees you, please know change doesn't come from the big office. It starts when someone chooses to stop, kneel down, and ask, "Are you okay?" and then truly listens. In every system, there are always people holding themselves together just so they won't be forgotten. And sometimes what they need most isn't a policy or a speech. It's a pair of eyes that truly see them. A question asked from the heart, "Are you okay?" And one person brave enough to stay and listen.